Sweden, and he came to UCSB for MA in statistics and PhD with all of us in control dynamics and robotics. He was with Evolution Robotics for a while, working on vehicle control and building control. And he's currently at advertising.com at AOL and leads a group developing optimal ad and content distribution algorithms for the internet. Very interesting work. Dr. Carlson holds 14 patents. That's good. And 8 pending. And please join me in welcoming Carl.
Which one of these is Nicholas?
The one on top. Not the duck, I mean.
So, thank you very much for coming. I'm very happy to be here. I looked last night when I was here last time on sort of an official list here. That was 7 years ago. It was in November of 2004, and talked about visual simultaneous localization and mapping. So it was robotics. So after a year after that, I switched from robotics to online advertising. It may sound like a major sort of step and change in career, but it turns out that the same technique that I use to control the robots and to navigate is something that I'm using now in online advertising. And as a matter of fact, the reason that I even in the first place got hired there was my background in controls and in statistics. So what I'm going to talk about now is...
Don't mind me, I'm just looking for the...
So you're going to tell us which fields were lucrative in the end?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really a combination of that. Study everything, do research in many areas. So I will sort of elaborate. I mean, so one reason why I actually found this field appealing was that I had been in robotics. I liked it a lot. When I was a startup company, I felt like I wanted to try something new. And a lot of controls problems everywhere, and I mean, you're in aerospace, etc. But the trick there is that a lot of very bright people have been working on control applications in aerospace and many other areas for a long time. So I felt like, I mean, my contribution there is going to be kind of this marginal, incremental, small steps. But here is a completely new area where, to my best knowledge, before I entered it, no one had really used controls in this area. So I felt like here, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities, even with simple solutions to make a big difference. So I found it very exciting for that reason. So what I will do is I talk about sort of applications with controls and optimization, and I had to kind of then choose whether to kind of keep it technical and mathematical and kind of just cover a very narrow area, or keep it more conceptual and try to cover a broader area. And I choose the latter. So I try to then avoid mathematics. I just want to present to you and introduce you to a lot of interesting problems and challenges that are really asking for more people to work on them.
You said that nobody had done this before. Why were these people then smart enough to know to hire you?
Well, actually, so I was hired by someone named Rob Leuenberger. Maybe the name sort of rings their head. So he's the son of David Leuenberger. And so they had, I mean, between 1998 until I was hired, they had developed this optimization system that did a good job, but it was based on a centralized system, a linear program, and it got to a point when the business was growing that it didn't scale. So they had a group of experts in operations research and in optimization, but then they realized, okay, well, they need something that kind of solved. There were some weaknesses of that system that needed to be addressed, and I'll get to them later. So then they knew, and kind of because by association they knew that maybe feedback control can be applied here. And then they started to look for people with that background.
Rob got his master's here, so as far as
Yes, he did. Indeed. So, all right. So first, I mean, one way to kind of describe the problem we look at is here. I mean, so this is a quote from many years ago. I mean, half the money we spend on advertising is wasted, but probably we don't know which half. So solving this problem is one way to describe what I will talk about in this presentation. But I will do it in a slightly different way. So an outline of the talk is I will first talk a little bit about the industry as a whole, and just to justify this, to show you that it's actually a lot of money in this, it's significant, it's growing, etc. I'll get into the business model of our company, describe the problem without involving math really. I will introduce you to the old solution, which I refer to as the planned economy. I will talk about the new solution, the market economy. I'll give you some results, and I will wrap up sort of with some remarks. So, first, so those are examples of ads. I mean, we've all seen them, and some of them may be annoying, but and you may even think that no one ever clicks on them. But actually, sometimes people do click on them, and that is what is making this sort of business very lucrative after all. So the problem is to figure out which ad should we plug in here to show to you when you go to this website. Then, looking at the as an industry, if you compare sort of advertising, different types of advertising, TV, newspaper, internet, etc. And while internet is not the biggest advertising sort of spending, it is the only one that's really increasing. So it gives us a hint that, okay, well, if this trend sustains, I mean, it's going to be even bigger. And there are a lot of companies that are trying to enter this, I mean, to sort of take a piece of the cake. Another way to look at it is here. If you just look at the spending over the course of the last sort of 11 years or so, we see it's a rapidly growing trend. And I mean, that's, so if this will at least continue for a few more years, I mean, it's going to be even on that will sort of be very important. Here's another way to look at it. If you compare the different media, so the TV, for example, there's an estimate that we, on average, are spending maybe 37% of our time on TV, maybe 29% on the internet, 19% on radio. So we see kind of people are spending more time on TV than on the internet. But the red bar here shows kind of how big share of the budget, of advertising budget, advertisers spend. It turns out that, I mean, they're, okay, well, it's sort of proportional to the spending, the time people, the people spend on TV. But internet is still kind of a very small piece of the cake that goes into internet advertising. So this is sort of an indication, again, that probably there is still a lot of room for growth. The potential is big. So that's kind of trying to justify kind of the industry. And here's the kind of
just a question. You had there the newspapers. Actually, show that in the previous slide. By newspapers here, which seems to not so bright future. Do you mean here? You just mean the paper newspapers, or are you also considering the online versions of the newspapers? Those who go to the internet, I guess.
Well, so this is from this e-market.com. I think it's just the printed newspapers, but I don't know for a fact. So this is our industry, and this is now over to kind of where we are in this space. So it's AOL and advertising.com. So advertising.com was acquired by AOL, say, 6 or 7 years ago or so, but we are almost running kind of as a separate company. And it's the biggest sort of chunk of this bar is associated to our advertising.com network. And what those bars are showing is that what is the percentage of the internet users in the US that see ads served by us? So you can see that in any single month. So in any single month, about 85% of all internet users in the US do see ads served by us, which is more than anyone else. And it doesn't mean that we are actually serving more impressions or more ads, because say Google, for example, are showing many more ads, but they keep showing the same ads to the same people. And this from an advertiser perspective, they want to reach as many different users as possible. And so that's sort of our ability to have been kind of number one almost every month for the last sort of 10 years is kind of something that sort of is important to us, and it's a good kind of argument when we're kind of signing contracts. So that's kind of, so I guess kind of where we are. All right, so now let's switch gear a little bit. So the business model. So here, the system, the optimization system that I will talk about, that is the engine and kind of the core and the heart of our business is AdLearn. And you can think about that essentially as the advertising equivalence of eHarmony. So we try to find kind of the match kind of publisher and ads. I mean, which ad goes with what publisher to make them happy, and which users. So we have internet users here. They go to a certain website, and we're trying to figure out which ad should we show there to make the best sort of benefit in some regard. And I'll get a little bit more deeper into details later, but what are kind of the constraints and what are the objectives. But on a high level, I mean, the publishers, they want to make money. So we are paying, we are buying real estate on those websites. So we are giving them money. So they want to monetize. I mean, when internet users go to those different websites here, they want to make money on those users. And so we pay them money. But they also want to protect the brand image. They want to make sure that they don't get sort of some bad ads. Some of the websites, I mean, some companies may not want to have competitors' ads on their websites, etc. They want to make sure that their user experience is good. They don't want to annoy users. So I mean, all of those things are things that they are concerned about. So that's sort of our job. On the other hand, here we have advertisers. They want to sell their products, and they're doing it by giving us a budget to show the different users on different websites, I mean, to find customers, to develop a brand, to increase sales, and to reduce expenditures, and also branding, protect brand image, etc. And then we want to maximize our profit in some regard. So that's kind of the highest level. Okay, so to one other way to just look at kind of the problem is this. Like, I mean, if we have two kind of ads here, we have two websites for each combination here. I mean, it's associated to some value. That depending on kind of what is the probability someone will click on an ad, or depending on the revenue model, I mean, each combination here has a value. So maybe to show this ad on this website may be worth $1.75 per 1,000 impressions. And it's kind of this type of sort of matrix that's kind of that is kind of in a sense kind of conceptually what we are dealing with throughout. But now, so it was only 2 by 2. I mean, now let's consider the size of our network. We are currently running in different countries. I mean, US is the biggest one. We are serving about 3 billion impressions per day. So it's a massive amount of data we are dealing with. At peak hour, I mean, maybe 50,000 impressions per second. And then we have some other number kind of to show kind of how many impressions we have served kind of since the beginning of last year, and also since the beginning, since the company was founded. So then kind of take this slide and the previous slide together, and then again kind of now look at this 2 by 2. But considering that the really actual size of the problem is that we have many thousands of ads, and we have thousands and thousands of possible places where to plug in those ads. And what to really figure out kind of what is optimal combinations. I mean, what is the optimal matching? I mean, so we really have, I mean, this by itself translates into a billion different combinations. I mean, now there are certain kind of constraints into it, so that number will be reduced, but we're still talking about many millions of possibilities how we can show those ads. So this kind of indicates that it's a very high dimension problem that we're solving, because we really want to kind of find that combination that will...
Niklas?
Yes?
The matrix is statistically known, or you're guessing, or is it some kind of a pricing?
No, so this is just kind of illustrate the concept. So we have to estimate all of those things. So I mean, typically, so this is kind of this massive matrix, is 17,000 by 55,000, and quite a number of those kind of combinations are not possible, so they're kind of blocked out. So some of them are kind of not applicable, but all the combinations are applicable. Then we don't know the value. Well, in some cases more than others we know the value, because it depends on kind of a revenue model. I mean, if we know that an advertiser will pay us every time we serve an ad, then we know kind of the value. But if an advertiser will pay us every time a person clicks on that, then it's a completely different game, because we don't know initially if a person will click, so we have to estimate that probability.
Is that related to what conversion means on the previous slide?
Yes. Okay. So I will get to kind of a little bit better definition of conversion soon. So it's a conversion. Think about it as a sale, for example. So we're dealing with 3 different key events. Impression is when you show the ad. Click is when someone clicks on the ad. conversion is when someone is taking some further action. It could be that you're signing up for a magazine subscription. It could be that you buy a car. It could be just something that you're providing your email address. So there are a lot of different types of conversions. And there are different revenue models.
Is the number 55,000 for publishers, is that realistic?
Yes, those are actual numbers. So, okay, so now can get a little bit deeper. So here, I will also define a few things. So, I mean, we have the publishers here. I mean, we have different payment models. So they may charge us based per impression, per click, or per conversion, or it could even be what is called a rev share deal, which means that they may charge a percentage of what we are making from the advertiser. So a lot of different possible revenue models, payment models. And they also have what we refer to as allowability. They may prohibit certain ads to be shown on their website. And on the advertiser side, on the other hand, we again have different payment models. They may pay us per impression, per click, or conversion. They may have different allowabilities. They may not want their ads to be shown on a certain type of websites. They may have requirements on targeting. They may only want to have their ads shown to people in California, or to people in a certain age bracket, or people that are using a certain browser, etc. They may also have frequency constraint, which means that they don't want their ad to be shown to the same person more than a certain number of times in 24 hours. So for example, at most 4 times in 24 hours. And then they have also a number of so-called campaign delivery constraints. They may have a budget of, say, $50,000 in 1 month, but they don't want all of that to be spent the first day or the last day, but they want to have it delivered smoothly throughout the month. They may have a lot of other sort of constraints. I mean, they may want to serve half of their ads to male, half of the ads to female, etc. So this is kind of the problem in a slightly more sort of lower level. So I choose to present the problem formulation kind of be consistent without using equations. So it's really that we have a revenue or profit function across all of those ad website combinations, and we have all of those constraints. And that the number of possibilities is very large, as I indicated before, which makes it challenging, but it's not only the high dimension that is problem. It's also that the profit is actually a non-linear thing. I mean, you think that it's the probability someone will click is between 0 and 1. The number of impressions, traffic to a website is non-negative. So if you are over-delivering, if you're too much budget, you can't subtract the budget. I mean, once you are delivered something, so it's kind of saturated. So it's a lot of saturations and things like that. And also, like I said earlier, I mean, we are some days reaching the 3 billion impressions per day. So it's a huge number of ad requests to serve every day. There are also a lot of challenging disturbances. I mean, we have sort of endogenous disturbances, meaning the disturbances sort of inside our own infrastructure. I mean, it could be delays to propagate all of kind of the volume data, I mean, from the ad servers. I mean, we have about 500 ad servers in the fleet, and I mean, every time someone is serving an impression or clicking on an ad, I mean, that is recorded in event logs that needs to be accumulated and put into databases and fed back to the optimization engine. So I mean, there are delays in those traffic flows, but there could also be outages. I mean, we are not, it's not a theoretical problem. I mean, we are really having this running, and it's running 24/7. So that's a type of disturbances we need to handle. There are also exogenous disturbances, that people's habits may change. I mean, maybe someday, I mean, it's more popular than other days to see certain ads. I mean, on Valentine's Day, it may be popular to show ads for flowers and chocolate, but the day after Valentine's Day is probably not popular anymore. I'll get to a few more of those in a little bit. But those are things that are really introducing problems. So that was kind of problem for me. So this is the old solution. So I call this the planned economy, because this is how they solved it before. So they had a decentralized optimization engineer. It's essentially a linear program. I mean, where the variables, it was all the combinations of ads and the website slots. And separately, they estimated probabilities, click-through probability, conversion probability, and traffic, etc. And then they're using kind of that as input here, and they had different constraints about the budget constraints from advertisers, etc. And then they're running this, they used to run it once per hour. And then once per hour, they had this ad allocation schedule. So all the kind of the alphas, kind of all the sort of the solution to this linear program, and they fed that up onto the ad servers once per hour. And they used that, and they aggregated and collected impression clicks and conversion volumes here, fed that back here, and they run that. So, I mean, what they did, they managed to linearize the problem, they reduced dimensionality, various ways to kind of be able to crunch all of this data in 1 hour, and they solved it, and they kind of cross their fingers that the kind of computation power will grow faster than the network. So, I mean, but this is really what made the business grow. It was founded in '98, and it was sold to AOL by two brothers. Their name, even the technology was developed by Onward, Rob Lundberg and his team. But they did it on behalf of the company Advertising.com, which was founded by two brothers on the East Coast that sold the company to AOL for $500 million back in 2004. So I mean, yes?
Even in this solution, did you ever deliver non-optimal solutions just to help with the estimation process?
Well, yes, since I mean the approximations, it turns out that it's suboptimal. I mean, but I mean they solved it. I mean, under the assumption that kind of all the approximations are correct. But
I imagine, for example, when a new website comes up that you don't have any data, somehow have to direct some of the traffic there to be able to estimate. Even
that's correct. So it's a learning. Yeah, they have to then sort of initialize. They have to assign some prior that may be completely wrong. So they have to, as a guess, okay, suppose that this new ad campaign, for example, will behave roughly like this other one over here, and it may be completely wrong. Yes. So I mean, that is something that did sort of acknowledge. And that's sort of really one reason. It's not only the scalability that was a problem why they wanted to sort of go to something else, but it was also the fact that I acknowledged there was a lot of suboptimality in the solution. And here are some of those weaknesses. It doesn't scale. That's kind of the most obvious thing. But also was a lot of approximations and assumptions that turned out it didn't really sort of maximize the profit. And also was a lot of imperfect predictions that sort of led to that campaign delivery constraints, which are sort of the ones that would be most obvious. I mean, if an advertiser wants to deliver that campaign, wants to deliver maybe $1,000 worth of ad budget per day, I mean, if one day they serve with $10,000 and next day nothing, I mean, it's obvious that we didn't place it well. And because of delays in the system, so once the centralized optimization system come up with an ad allocation, that the solution here is kind of assumed to do the right pacing over the next hour, but because of a few hours delay here to get the data back here, we don't know until a few hours later that, whoops, this allocation actually resulted in a massive over-delivery. And also that because there was no feedback mechanism, it didn't learn from its mistake. So it could be that consistently, hour after hour after hour, keep over-delivering, which could even be sort of embarrassing. So I mean, it turned out, I mean, before sort of it came to a new decentralized system, I mean, a lot of people thought the company that sort of used Band-Aids to kind of patch the system, kind of to have something sort of like feedback systems to prevent it. But this kind of the status of the technology and the company sort of when they sort of decided to form a control research team, and I was kind of the first one there. Yes?
What would be the optimal here? How would it be defined?
Optimal, well, in the way I presented or defined the problem is that we want to maximize our profit, but we also want to satisfy all those constraints by advertising publisher. And I didn't describe those sort of constraints mathematically, but one constraint is pacing. That they have a budget, they want to deliver the budget kind of smoothly throughout the flight. But in practice, it's going to be plus minus something because it's not going to be perfect. So it sort of turns into this gray zone. Another constraint, which I will touch on later, could be that they wanted at least a certain click-through rate, or performance rate. So that's a long range of different kind of, some business requirements that are better defined than others. So that's this, it's a continuously sort of process to make business defined problems, to make sure they're well defined. I mean, we from research, we are telling them, oh, you're presenting a contradicting requirement, or it's not well defined. So I mean, it's kind of, it's evolving.
I wanted to do a thought experiment. And one way to define the optimum would be, observe the whole traffic for the day, 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And let's imagine for a second computation is free.
Okay.
Right? I can obviously now go back and use whatever algorithm or whatever model I want to figure out what would be the optimal revenue subject to all the conditions and constraints.
Well, I mean, the problem is that it's a dynamic system. I mean, you need to know the click-through rate of something. I mean, if you just have the traffic, it doesn't sort of tell us. I mean, we need to serve, in order to know kind of that, be able to do that, we need to serve all of the ads, all of the users on all of the websites. But I mean, that's not what we can do. I mean, if a user is going to a certain website only 5 times per day, I mean, we have only 5 possibilities that day to show an ad.
Okay, so I get that only makes the problem even harder now, right? I mean, even assuming the probability of click-through rates given to you for free, right? That would be one way to define a conservative optimum.
Right.
Is that a target that one could even hope to?
I don't think so, because it changes also. And I mean, if you will influence all those probabilities by showing ads. I mean, if you keep annoying people, if you keep showing kind of the same ad to someone, or a similar ad, I mean, it may improve or increase or decrease the probability of another ad. I mean, there are a lot of coupling that sort of will impact.
Okay, so am I to understand that in some sense we can't even define what the optimum would be?
Well, I mean, we can define the problem. We can define the problem as we can
but
solve.
we can't measure it.
No, I can't. I can't imagine that you can.
So,
I mean, you can have a thought experiment about it, but I mean, the thing that the environment changes over time.
So suboptimality is sort of inherent to the way.
I'm afraid so.
Okay.
But couldn't you say that the advertisers maximize their return for their advertising investment?
Right.
So that's the optimal, and you say you don't have enough information to actually solve that problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I would put it, but it doesn't sort of means what would define the problem? We don't have we can't come up with the numbers for that.
You got a lot of clicks here.
A lot of things.
So this situation was in what year when the control system was created?
We started in 2005. Yeah. So that sort of really kind of then defines the paradigm shift. That we had this old centralized and plan-based system, didn't scale, and it didn't satisfactorily accomplish the different objectives. But then we want to go to this new solution, decentralized, feedback-based, to scale well, you want to learn from its mistakes.
What did you start in 2005?
Yes.
The new thing or the old thing?
Now, the old system existed in 2005. That's when we started to go after this solution. So
at first I understood you to say that that's when this other thing came online, and then I was going to ask what the brothers sold. But
right. Yeah. No. So the first version of the centralized system was developed, I think, in '98, and I think it was based on Excel or something like that. So it sort of evolved over time, but then in 2005 we started to develop this system. And so conceptually, this is how you can think about it. That we have a campaign management system. We have one of those systems associated with each campaign now. The previous system was one system for all of the campaigns. But so here we have now one campaign management system that is containing two key components. We have the ad valuation component and we have the campaign control component. And this system will every few minutes, currently maybe every 15 minutes or so, calculate so-called bids. So it's how much it's willing to bid, what is the value it will associate to each impression. So it means that regardless what the campaign here is, I mean, so it could be a campaign that is paying us per click or per conversion per impression, but we want to calculate what is the effective value that they assign to an impression. So, and then we are generating bids for all of the possible ads, all the possible websites and different users here. And then we are feeding those bids into the ad server fleet. So then we have, again, there's about 500 ad servers. And on each of those ad servers, we are carrying out auctions. So it's a market clearing for each and every impression request that comes in. So if you are going to a website, and we have bought real estate there, so then there is a request coming to our ad server saying, hey, we want to serve this ad to you right now. And then we are very rapidly figuring out which are the ads that are interested in this impression, which are the ads that want to be shown to this person. And then we are sorting them and see which one is the highest bidder, which one is the one that values this impression the highest. And then we serve that ad to you. And that event, the impression, will be recorded here, and it will be aggregated, and then every, say, 15 minutes or so, we have a number of impression clicks and conversions for all of those different websites. And that information is fed back first in one loop here. That is the valuation component, and will then have the responsibility of estimating click-through rate and conversion rates, etc. And so that's on a very granular level. So you could have many different of those combinations per campaign. And then when information comes back here to the campaign controller, and you can think about this sort of as a cruise controller of the ad campaign. So this, the job of this one is to pace the campaign and things like that. So for the most simple type of campaign that only has one campaign delivery objective, which could be the pacing, then we have the desired speed. We want to deliver a certain number of impressions per hour or per day. And then this one, bid adjustment here is like a gas pedal. Okay, let's accelerate or deaccelerate the delivery of the campaign. And so this will increase or decrease the bid. And this is then going on. And we are running this in parallel kind of for all of it. So then the kind of the problem from a research perspective is to design kind of rules, the algorithms inside here, because this is where the intelligence lives. And yeah, so as a side note, we are actually using MATLAB for a lot of this. And it wasn't the plan from the beginning, but it turned out that it keeps the development cycle very rapid. So when I came on board, I mean, the standard process was that researchers wrote design algorithms and design specs, handed it over to computer scientists that implemented it in Java or C++, etc. But it turned out the development cycle was several months. But anytime you develop a feedback control system, you really need to get a prototype out there so you can gather real data in a closed loop. And so what they did is that they started by building this harness for us so we could interact with the production system using our MATLAB algorithm. And then over time, kind of that was hardened. So I mean, but we are, by keeping key components, key aspects of that sort of system in place up to this day, has allowed us the very rapid development cycle. So we are kind of refining the algorithms every couple of weeks or faster as needed. But the key takeaway here is that, I mean, there is a market clearing taking place here. We have a feedback control system here. We have valuation component there. And I'll talk a little bit more about both of those in a second.
So where does optimization appear in any of that design?
In this, well, so you can think about it as sort of bidding is an option. So what is the ideal bid? So that we have sort of constraints. I mean, what is the optimal bid, I mean, to meet certain objectives? And that, so then if there are so limited constraints, I mean, if we only want to optimize, suppose, for example, which is actually, it's not really a good example, but it's an easy to understand example, is that suppose we want to minimize the cost for this advertiser, but we want to deliver a certain amount of budget. So that it means that he wants to bid as little as possible, he wants to reduce his bid as much as possible. But if this bid, if all of the bids for given advertiser goes down to zero, he's not going to win anything. So that means that a constraint is that he wants to deliver $1,000 worth of budget per day, for example. But he wants to get as many impressions as possible, so it means he wants to bid on the cheapest impressions in the network. Because it could be cheaper to serve an ad on Facebook than to serve it on CNN. So they want to find out, okay, where are the cheapest impressions? So that's kind of the, now for that case, and for a campaign wants to minimize the cost, it wants to find kind of the pockets of cheap inventory. Okay?
And so, and the inventory or the supply doesn't change too much. Is that true?
Well, that's part. We have to estimate. We have to try to forecast it and things like that. But I mean, it does change. I mean, it has dramatic seasonality effects, but it's also have what we sort of refer to holiday effects, or I mean, it could be very nice. We'll get to some of that a little bit later.
Do advertisers have penalties for not meeting the demands? Not meeting the commitments?
One more time?
Are there penalties for not meeting commitments?
Well, usually if we cannot deliver a campaign, so if it under-delivers, so to say, it's not typically a commitment. There are exceptions. I mean, there are where we have sort of a special sort of relationship where we have sort of guaranteed delivery. But if it under-delivers, then we usually go back to advertisers and say, hey, I mean, you have to pay more, or we have to improve your creative so that it's more appealing to the user. And then they typically kind of agree and we renegotiate. But if we over-deliver, if it's just a little bit, we can get away with it. But if it's a lot, we typically have to make good, which means that we don't charge for the over-delivery. And that's sort of an opportunity cost for us, because we could have sold those impressions to someone else. Okay? So some of those challenges, and this kind of captures to a large extent kind of all of those very exciting research problems that are kind of still open. I mean, we have sort of what we can think about as a first-generation solution to those. But it's quite interesting here. I mean, first of all, let's talk about very small event rates. I mean, some of you may say that, oh, you never click on ads. And I mean, maybe a lot of people don't click on ads, but some people do, but very few. So I mean, it may be that we have one click or action or conversion per 1,000 per million impressions served. And we want to estimate that rate. And it's a challenge to just come up kind of with an accurate, robust estimate. Because we may serve after one impression, nothing happens, two impressions, nothing happens. We may have to serve many thousand before the first impression happens where someone actually do something. Sparse data, I mean, for a lot of combinations of ad and site, we don't have any data at all. Latency. And we talked about sort of one thing is the delay in the infrastructure, data flow delays. But there's another aspect of it is that for a campaign that is paying us per conversion, suppose a car company, suppose Ford comes to us and they say, okay, we want you to deliver 1,000 conversions. They want to sell 1,000 cars. They will pay us only when people buy a car via the ad. First of all, very few people would buy a car online. That's one problem. But some people do. But they probably wouldn't make up their mind right away. So if we show an ad now, it may take many days, maybe a week later, because you're going to go home and ask your wife or husband or spouse and look at your bank account. And then you decide, and then you buy. But since we are paid on, there's a maximum budget that we will only be paid for this 100 or 1,000 sold car. So we don't, I mean, if our impressions served result in many more conversions, we don't get paid for it. So we could have sold those impressions to someone else. But that means that it's in our interest to know this later, so we need to estimate that. Because otherwise, if the campaign runs for 1 month, if we keep the first few days nothing happens, we show lots of impressions. But when we're approaching the end of the month, I mean, we may want to stop showing impressions because the impressions we've already shown will turn into conversions.
Just out of curiosity, between the three kinds of revenues for you, the impression, the click, and the conversion, what does your distribution look like?
I would say in number of advertisers, we probably have more CPA campaigns.
I mean in dollars.
In dollars, it's probably CPM maybe is about the same as CPC and CPA. But it's because they're usually priced higher than CPC and CPA, but kind of we have more of the CPC and CPA. But kind of It's it's kind of a preference. It's kind of evolves over time.
So none of them is insignificant.
No. All of them are kind of significant, and I mean, so when we were finding, I mean, we are most kind of competitive on the performance, CPC and CPA, because there are not a lot of other companies doing that. I mean, there are a lot of startup companies that are providing a network for CPM campaign, because that's kind of the easiest problem to solve. And we have time variability, that volume and response rate and all of those things. I mean, they contain non-zero trends and seasonality, step changes. We have capping effects, and one capping effect, I'll return to that a little bit later, is in relation to kind of the marketing mechanism. As I said earlier, that if you go to a website, then what happens on the ad server is that first it will rank all of the bidders, and it will serve the ad to the first bidder, the highest bidder. But since that information, if suppose that two advertisers, they are interested in exactly the same impressions, always. It will always be the highest bidder that will win that impression. But that means that the highest bidder maybe will deliver too fast. So what will happen? Well, the campaign control will reduce the bid in the purpose of reducing the delivery, so slowing it down. But in this case, I mean, it will reduce it, nothing happens, and but here, when this previously highest bidder is bidding lower than the second highest, then all of the impression will be served to this one rather than to this one. So then we have this non-linearity, we have discontinuity, and that's sort of something we are facing. So that if one advertiser's campaign is delivered kind of in an aggressive way, I mean, you can think about it, it will impact others. It's kind of like if you see cars on the freeway, that if one car is driving poorly, it will put other people in jeopardy.
So so I see how your design solves the scalability problem. It's kind of concentrated on a campaign basis, and then you have the bidding process later on, and you have 50 or something of those servers. Now here in your second bullet about sparse data, you talk about combinations of ads. Where does that get resolved? Where do you consider the effects of different campaigns on each other? Each of them is really independent.
Okay, so yeah, that's a tough one. So I'm sure there are. I mean, it's an open area of research. I mean, I think a lot of more can be done, because a lot of correlations that are probably ignored kind of already in this case. So I mean, I encourage you to work on it.
So you're not trying to increase the frequency with which you solve this optimization problem?
No, we would like to do that too. So I mean, it's kind of, we have some different, we want to do it better to provide profit, we want to do it fast, we can do it with, I mean, more often. I mean, it's easier to kind of avoid misdelivery, and we can kind of refine things. So I mean, it's a lot of, I mean, we also want, here I want to talk about the partition segment kind of websites and advertising. Really one more dimension is that users can be segmented. We can have different audiences. We can break it down, okay, well, what is the performance for people in this age bracket and in this geographic location. So I mean, it's really, practically speaking, I mean, we can make it, I mean, even more complicated.
But these are the most relevant problems at this moment?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, I tried to kind of simplify it a little bit, to kind of fit it into kind of a one-hour presentation. But I think that besides this, I mean, the only thing that I didn't talk about, and I haven't covered in any of those slides, is kind of the audience segmentation aspect of it, because that is highly relevant also, but that's, we'll take another hour. Okay? So let's look at a couple of sort of real examples. I mean, here latency, and we have 3 examples of campaigns, so this is real data, and with different distributions of latency. And this one, most of the conversion took place just after a few hours. Over here in the other extreme, after this campaign, there are some conversions took place about 300 hours after the impression was served. And so this is something we don't know beforehand. So we need to estimate this. You can see, I mean, we have to have kind of a system identification within the algorithm that based on sort of a stream of events, I mean, time series data, we have to come up kind of with these distributions.
Just a question. These conversions, if I see an ad, but then I go to the dealer, in the car example, and then buy the car there, lost.
Yeah, typically.
You have to buy it through some website that's been agreed upon.
Yeah, we need somehow to associate. So I'm sure we are sort of missing out on a lot, but that's the name of the game. Another thing is that a car company may run ad campaigns with more networks than ours. So maybe we show an ad today, Yahoo shows an ad tomorrow, you buy the car the next day. But then there is kind of this industry standard is the last impression served. So in that case, Yahoo would sort of get the benefit of it and we get nothing.
How do you know at all that like you serve the impression of the same person that goes back 300 hours later and buys the car?
It's typically based on a few ways, but typically sort of cookies. That we can kind of then put in your cookie that you've been kind of seeing this ad, and then if you go back, I mean, you go to the website to buy the car, I mean, then it will check, okay, does it show one of our cookies on your computer or not? If it does, I mean, it will match it. Yeah, that's another way how they're losing things. Yeah. So I mean, it's, I mean, there's no perfect solution. I mean, but that's kind of, we are still making money. So those are some examples of kind of random noisy data and seasonality. Here's some volume data. We see kind of is a daily high and daily low. And typically, the traffic intensity is about 10 times higher than the daily high compared to the daily low. Here is a click-through rate data. It's very noisy, but you may kind of imagine that there is actually some seasonality in that also. But it's not consistent. I mean, here it seems to be kind of downward pointing trend. It's a kind of what we call a burnout effect. That if you keep showing the same ad, I mean, people get fed up with that eventually, and no one wants to see it anymore. Another aspect of this is that we are dealing with not only Gaussian noise, a lot of engineers. That's my experience. They sort of think about the universe as a Gaussian universe. The noise that exists is white noise, it's Gaussian noise, it's well behaved, there are no heavy takes or anything. But in the online space, I mean, we are actually dealing with a lot of other noise. So that kind of, I think, one thing that kind of appreciate with my background, actually I had to spend some time in the statistics department and got sort of an exposure to that. And that's sort of, to me, it has been a very good compliment. To then actually realize there is something called gamma distributions, or Poisson, or etc. Here's the illustration. This is actually just simulated, just kind of for the sake of communicating the concept of the coupling effects. And I explained earlier, kind of because of kind of the market clearing mechanism, is that if there are two bidders interested in the same impressions, I mean, if they're kind of approaching, this one wants to speed up the delivery, this one wants to reduce it, but here nothing happens, but then when the order of their bids changes, that the delivery will rapidly change. But obviously, in general, there are not sort of two advertisers only that are interested in exactly the same impression, because there are a lot of overlap, and I mean a lot of different bidders, and I mean different bid values. So normally it's a little bit more well behaved, but sometimes we're sort of facing this principal behavior. That from the perspective of one specific advertiser, if it increasing or the price from 0 to 1, I mean, if it's bidding below some level, it will not win anything. But then at different sort of discrete times here, at different specific distinct price point, there would be kind of a step change. So that shows that, well, here, suppose that that this advertiser really wants to have a deliver of what corresponds to, say, 30% of the volume. Then we want to find this point. Well, there is nothing. I mean, it's I didn't only deliver on the deliver. So that kind of is illustrating another challenge.
I have another question. So you get new bits every 15 minutes, right?
Yes.
But so you serve thousands of impressions per second.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have the highest bid, and then I will get every impression for 15 minutes.
Yes.
And
If you have the highest for all of the impressions, if that, then many of identical impressions, but typically of different people on different websites. So I mean, it's not identical impressions, so you're not going to win everything.
Okay, but so I'm bidding for. I'm just imagining I'm bidding for like the right column in the about.com website.
Yeah.
And so I get this 15 minutes now all the time. Because I'm guessing if you serve thousands per second, then this one impression is
Yeah, but a different type of users. So I mean, there are some people in California, some people that are about 30 years old, and then others frequency cap constraints. That's, you may only want to have to serve at most 4 ads to this particular user for our period. So I mean, there are a lot of kind of those things that sort of make it at least a little bit less challenging.
Okay, so the one impression doesn't come up often enough in 15 minutes, so you could, instead of giving everything to the highest bidder, kind of spread it. If I only bid a little more than the second highest, and he gets a few impressions.
Well, yeah, I mean that kind of work around kind of to that. So it's but the principle is that the highest bidder will win everything. But thanks to that, a lot of impressions are not identical impressions. Okay.
So you try to estimate age based on where they're going, or
Not age. We're trying to estimate
user?
the performance for different users. Could you see that? What is the click-through rate for a user in this age bracket? Because maybe to sell diapers, I mean, people, typically people may have kids that are very young. I mean, wouldn't you probably diaper ads to teenagers? Unless we think about kids.
I'm just ignorant of how you figure out what age group you're showing.
Oh, I see. Oh, well, so for many users we don't know it. For some people who do, it could be if you have, for example, an email account with AOL, then you may have provided your email account, your age as part of that, so on the same computer. And then if you go to a website and we see, okay, the same IP address is someone that's probably having this age, but that the problem is could be more than one user of the computer, etc. So there's no kind of waterproof.
Andy, if your age is anywhere in the internet world, they know.
So, okay, so
They know my age, just how do they know I'm using this?
so this is just kind of another representation of block diagram earlier. We have a valuation component, we have a campaign component. Those together will compute a bid. And the valuation, just talk very quickly about that one. It's a matter of estimating the expected return per impression, but we also have to attach a learning value, because if we need to look at the opportunity for the impression. I mean, if you serve one impression, it doesn't convert, it doesn't mean that it's worth nothing, because we don't have enough data, so we can, on a statistically significant level, say that the value is 0. So then we have to attach what is called a learning value to increase the bid, kind of to accomplish what is called exploration. So to give one example here, if we have kind of 2 options of what ads to show, A or B, the point estimate for B could be here, the point estimate of A could be lower, but the uncertainty of A is higher. So it means that, well, if we were to gather more information about media A, so the ad A, it may turn out that it's actually higher and more work. So kind of that's one challenge in the valuation aspect of it. So we need them to invest some money in just the learning process, and then the rest of the money to exploit what we have learned. So kind of that's what we have to keep in mind in terms of learning. And that's one example of so what has accomplished as part of the learning. I mean, we have conversion rate. I mean, you see the seasonality. I mean, it's in a trend, it goes up and down. It's noisy. The number is very small, which makes it hard. So that let's go then into the so-called cruise controller. And that's what we have the control campaign delivery constraint. So I mentioned already the pacing objective we refer to as a smoothness control. We want to pace a campaign, deliver a certain number worth of impressions or clicks or conversions per day. They may also want to have at least a certain click-through rate or conversion rate overall for the campaign. They may want to have, as part of the branding for the advertising, want to be delivered on many websites. They may not only want to have their ads show up on Facebook, but they want to have it on many more places. They might also want to split the ads to different user groups. It could be male, female, or certain age groups, or half in California, half in New York. So it's to kind of accomplish those. That's the more kind of that fundamental kind of feedback control problem. And the thing is that those are in general, I mean, it's something we need to deliver in combination. So it's a multi-objective control problem. We have to both smoothness and performance control. And it turns out that to accomplish those objectives, I mean, it's a coupling problem. They're not decoupled, and we'll see that in a second. Here, I'm getting kind of close to experiments. I mean, here's a few real campaigns. This is just a screenshot from a report that we're using. Kind of on the left side, we have some information about this campaign, about when it ran, and what type of campaign it is. This is a campaign we're running in the UK. Here in the center, we have the daily delivered budget. So each bar here is how many dollars worth of ad budget to deliver each day. At this vertical dashed line, that's when this system was transitioned from the old centralized system to a new decentralized feedback-based system. And the most obvious change here is that with the feedback-based system, we have much smaller volatility. So, and the horizontal line is a desired pacing. So we don't have perfect pacing, but it's much better than before. Here, in the right upper corner, we have the hourly impression volume data, and we can again see that in the old system it was very spiky delivery, while in the new system it follows the natural time of day pattern. Here we have the control signal, kind of the think about the gas pedal, and it sort of has different properties. I mean, first we refer to kind of the initialization controller. It's a more rapid sort of adjustment to quickly zoom in on roughly the right level. And then it's sort of graceful control. And then you see here it went up, but it did go up here in response to this under-delivery. So here it started to under-deliver, and it could have been that a new competing campaign may have entered the network and started to win impressions that otherwise would have gone to this campaign. So then in response, it had to speed up. And then it started to win more again, and then kind of continued to pace approximately right, and it did gracefully adjust. So this is kind of one example. Another example here is when an advertiser here, first for a few days, wants to deliver about $550 worth of budget per day, but then on February 10th, it suddenly decided, oh, we want to increase the delivery to $1,100 per day. And they want to keep up with that. But the way we have solved it is that we have some different modes of the controller, because if we have kind of this graceful, kind of robust controller, it wouldn't have rapidly enough caught up to this level here. So then we have a more aggressive controller mode, but once it sort of settles in on this new level, it sort of then turns into this graceful behavior again, and then it sort of delivers about right. Here, the last example is a campaign that has with two objectives. In this case, it has a smoothness objective. It wants to hit kind of this horizontal line here, but it also wants to have at least a certain click-through rate, which is represented by this horizontal green line here. So at the beginning of this scenario, you see that the click-through rate was here very low, so it needs to get up here. The pacing was about right. And just kind of to introduce you to different graphs. I mean, so again, here up in the upper right, it's still, again, the hourly impression volume. The cost per click, that is really just the inverse of the conversion rate. So it's the effective cost that an advertiser pays per click. So it's really redundant. So we can look at the conversion click-through rate here, and we want to increase the click-through rate up to this green level. And we have one performance control signal here that we're increasing here. And the way it's doing that is, if you think about it, for a given advertiser, it's estimating the value of all the different types of impressions. And in order to speed it up or slow it down, it will increase the bid price up or down, essentially uniformly like this. But if you want to increase the performance, what it's doing, it will first line up all of the different types of impressions. So junk inventory, it could be impressions on some social network, and up to high quality impressions over here. And in order to increase the performance, it wants to less of those impressions. So it will reduce the price when it's bidding for those. It will do like this. But then what happens with doing that, typically the supply of junk inventories is typically much higher. So when it's doing that, it will typically under-deliver. So in order to keep up the pacing, it needs to increase. So that's what you see here, that how they are coupled. The performance signal goes up, 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 because it's giving up more of the damping vector. But the smoothness control has to compensate with that by increasing. And I keep doing that kind of, and then up here, it's hitting approximately right click-through rate, and it's still kind of keeping up with the delivery. So that's kind of what makes it there's a coupling effect. So it's not only do we have those discontinuities, we have this coupling effect both within the control, among different control objectives, but also across the different campaigns. So that's the last example, and before I wrap up with some concluding remarks, let's say that what the new system is actually enabling can be providing that the old system did not. Because the old system didn't have the concept of market clearing, it didn't have the concept of a value, because what it was dealing just with a percentage, an allocation. While the new system is assessing a value to each and every impression. So in the old system, we had a centralized system that's setting up the allocation schedule here. But the new system here, first of all, is decentralized, sharing limited information, amount of information across the different campaigns. It's having everything, all impressions have a price. But it's also the fact that it's decentralized, but it means that I should fit it into this figure. But since it's associated with price, then we can actually even look outside of our own network. So this is our network, but maybe we can buy that same impression from someone else, because there's a lot of networks out there. So if we, for a very particular impression, can find a cheaper impression by buying it from Yahoo, from Microsoft, or somewhere else, we would do that, because, well, we make money, it's cheaper for us. So that's kind of, there are a lot of so-called impression exchanges out there, where kind of like hooking up different ad networks and everything, and congruent fund bidding. Some advertisers, they choose to bid on their own without engaging companies like us. So it's kind of, it opens up. It's a lot of things that can be done. Actually, I did have a figure of that. So this here you can kind of see that your campaign management system we can buy from someone else, or we can also, since we're a bid price, we can also have individual advertisers that have chosen not to go through our own network in our own campaign management system if they think they can do a better job than we do to deliver the campaign. It's nothing that prohibits them from doing that. So we just have to agree about a contract, how much they will pay for things. They can build it kind of on their own. And then finally, just kind of wrap it up. I hope what I've been able to communicate, first of all, the thing that advertising is actually a very big and significant industry and is growing rapidly. And that it's also a lot of challenging problems involving controls, analytical system computations, statistics, etc. And even after a few years, we have a system in place, it's delivering a lot of impressions and running a big network. And I would say that we have sort of proven that feedback control actually can provide a great value added to this this industry that traditionally has not used feedback control. But also that a lot of interesting control problems remaining to be solved. And I invite all of you to work on that. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, have we exhausted the questions, or maybe there's some more?
So I like the distributed approach for solving the scalability problem. My question is whether if you had kept you have an optimization problem, and you could have tried to solve the optimization problem itself with all the inputs, with the feedback control in a distributed manner. Would that have been, what would that have been possible? Now you're really approximating. You are from the beginning bidding and approximating, and you don't know exactly what the other guys are bidding, so there is a...
That's true. So I think, in principle, I think it could have been sort of better, but also we probably should think a little bit about the trend of the industry, where many advertisers are becoming more and more aware of opportunities. They are getting to the point where they don't only want to sign up a contract at a fixed price, but they may ask us to bid on their behalf. So meaning that we want to do things on them. So it sort of becomes a different revenue model. So then, if that trend continues, we'll sort of get into a true kind of then multiplayer sort of game where we have many players, and I mean we are getting a commission on that. So I mean it's a little bit kind of we have to put things in perspective about where the trend is going also.
I remember hearing something about there was some sort of add-on or alteration you could make to some browser that would eliminate ads entirely. Have you heard about this? And what is your industry's response?
I don't want to hear about that.
Right, exactly. I think it's going to do bad things as a result.
Yeah.
Have you heard about it?
So well, I mean that is sort of one risk. Another thing is that there are kind of factors that kind of forces lobbying kind of to limit or eliminate information we're able to use, because a lot of regulation about what data we can store and how we can use it, and a lot of people block their cookies, etc. So, but I see that both as a challenge and as an opportunity, because it's probably in everybody's interest if, from an advertising industry perspective, that ads are made more appealing. So if you take some magazine, say an interior design magazine, some people are buying that magazine, I mean, basically for ads. I mean, like appealing kind of thing, kind of that they get ideas about their home improvements, etc. So I think that the sort of really opportunities for us to come up with such an appealing way to show ads so that all the users wants to see them. So that it's not annoying. I mean, it shouldn't be annoying. I mean, look, darn, pop-up ads. But it should be something. It should be kind of a win-win situation.
More? Okay, thanks again, Nicholas.
Good area.